Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. So at current I have done a few builds, that is the sword and shield, the great axe, the spear, the fire staff, the life staff and the ice gauntlet. Now for today's video we're going to be I haven't touched the fire staff. Today we'll actually be doing the fire staff, and next we'll move over to the warhammer, ending off this section with the void gauntlet. So let's get into the fire staff. Now I have mastered this tree basically for the powers themselves once before, but this time it's just a minor version of it. I'm going to explain its usages and abilities after I go through the tree. So if you want to have a full recap of everything that I do in my videos, in the start I read through each of the sides individually. So I'll do the Pyromania one time for the first 15 minutes of the video once I start the explanation. Then I'll do the Fire Mage for the next 15 minutes of the video. I explain each perk and how it stacks up. I explain its overall usage and usability in actual combat situations, and I hope that it actually carries through enough of a message to give you an idea of how useful these skills are. Now, obviously, I do explain it to the best of my ability. There are some parts where I'm not the best on it, and that's just the way that it goes. But I do explain why these are good items for you to use in particular roles if you have the right builds. And that is the one thing that you have to know. The build itself that you need to use it in a particular role is an entirely different situation, because that will track all the way back to your attributes. If your attributes are put together in the right format, you can have a fantastic usage of your devices. Example, if you're looking at this, you can see spear is here and spear is here in dexterity. So if you have strength and dexterity as your primary weapon stats and you're running a sword and shield or a spear, you're actually taking the best advantage of that particular set. If you're running a rapier with dexterity and intelligence as your primary, which is what I'm currently running, as you can see, it's rapier and void gauntlet. Now the void gauntlet does use focus. Unfortunately, I haven't upped it. At the maximum, when you have weapons, you need 3 perks. Generally, they'll never require you to break up into all of them. If you break up into each individual perk, you've set your weapons incorrectly, and you really are drowning yourself in a lot of trouble just to get that little boost. You can see that my constitution is really high. If I eat the right foods and I boost up this by another 40 points, that will lead me to the max constitution I can hold. It will definitely be a major improvement. If I can put on another 100 in any one of these attributes, that would really help me in terms of usage for them in the field. And as I said, you need at least 100 in them for usage in the field. As you can see, 300 is the max. That's a third of the power. So if I had 100 strength, 100 dexterity, and I was running sword and spear, it would be a fantastic build. Now for today's video, I am explaining something that is a bit controversial. It's a bit heavy, and this one here will be reliant on you making sure that you're using the right sets. Now, although the fire staff is not in the focus class, it's in the intelligence class, right? And you only really need to break it up between 2 perks if you really want to use it with the sword and shield, or if you want to use it in the focus of a mage, you only have to break it up between intelligence and focus, because all your mage skills are right here and there's only one other item. Or you could just go pure intelligence on your build with a constitution backbone for you if you're using pure ice gauntlet, fire staff, or if you use any one of these weapon combinations. All of these are possibilities, but I'm not going to go through it because that gets a lot more difficult and it scales up with your weapon choices. So let's jump into the Pyromania. So here we go with Flamethrower. Creates a 4-meter jet of flame from the staff, dealing 50% weapon damage every half second. Each hit inflicts burn, dealing 3% weapon damage each second for 6 seconds. Now, working this out, every second gives you approximately 1% weapon damage. So it's a full weapon damage every second. That makes it a very useful skill for you to use. So if you have a fire staff and you apply maximum thrust on the Flamethrower, you can really go at it. Now, the cooldown on it is 7.4 seconds. Any stun or breaking attack will stop you from using Flamethrower, so please note that if you are going to go Flamethrower crazy. Now, as I said, a mage's general role is not to stand in front. There are several reasons for this. Number one, a mage generally doesn't have a lot of health. Your breakdown on a pure mage build will put you in a very small amount of health. So if you are running a pure mage build, this isn't a good one for you. Not sorry. It isn't a good idea for you to actually rush into the front line. Not that it's not a good one for you. Rushing into the front line will result in you taking some damage because you will pull aggro with the skill. The skill will pull aggro because you are applying burn damage. That 3% which lasts for 6 seconds is a 3% extra. That means you actually do 103% weapon damage per second for 6 seconds. And 103 times 6 is 609. And if you can actually hold on to the Pyro manager's Flamethrower for a full minute, that is one of the best damages you can apply from a single ability within that minute. A minute is 60 seconds, so you're going 60 times that initial 1%. That gives you 60 times your weapon damage. Now, that is a massive one for you to hold, and it does apply a massive advantage. However, it requires the use of potions, which will break this here off immediately. If somebody can have a healing ability or a mana reduction or a mana infusion ability to you, this here will help big time. As you can see, it costs 5 mana per second, and if you're counting that into your calculation, 5 a second means that you're going to burn through it in 20 seconds. So 20 seconds is the reasonable time for this. 20 seconds means it's 20 times your weapon damage with just the first ability if you use it non-stop from start to end. However, having breakers and people to pull off aggro from you is highly important if you are using this ability. It is highly deadly. With the 3% extra times 20, that gives you 60. So that is quite a big boost to it. It's 20.6% damage that you're actually doing. 20.6 times the damage that you are doing compared to your standard hits. So that is just the start of Flamethrower. Now let's go up to Fire Reach. Increase the range of Flamethrower by 50%. This means you now have a 6-meter Flamethrower. That means you are now capable of standing outside of the standard range of attacks. This is now the perfect range for you to be in a mid-range assault position. Using this to your advantage will be a good thing to do, and it is going to give you quite a bit of damage. Moving on, you have increased base damage of Flamethrower by 25%. Now, a 25% increase leads up to this 20-second countdown. Remember that I said it does 100% a second. If you're increasing it by 25%, that means you are now blasting it up to 75% per second for every half a second. So that means it's 150 every second. 150 times your total amount of time. That really becomes a big thing. If I am incorrect, it's 125, plus you can add the 3 seconds from the burn. That's 128% at the bare minimum. 128 times 20, you've got a massive figure. You don't have a small figure. It's now 30 times the weapon damage, putting it in the same class as the Ice Gauntlet. And as I said, it does have a weakness. You only have 20 seconds, and you have to hold it for your complete mana to burn out. If you do it with less than your complete mana, you will lose time on this, and your damage will obviously come down. Any abilities that help increase your mana regen will increase the duration of this ability on the field, because your mana still regens while you are using it. Last but not least, Flamethrower has no cooldown. So Pyro Dancer. If you use Flamethrower and you have this ability active with the last one where it has no cooldown, the moment you finish apply your Flamethrower, and say for example you actually drink a mana potion that recovers you 100%, you instantly re-engage. That means that you have a 20-second attack that you can do 2 times in a row or 3 times in a row, or you can continuously keep doing it for as many potions as you carry on yourself. That is a massive advantage to you as a player, and it is something that you should think of. Okay, Incinerator. Cause a fiery explosion around yourself that deals 130% weapon damage and pushes back all enemies 3 meters. Inflicts burn on stuck foes, deals 3% weapon damage each second for 6 seconds. Costs 22 mana. Now, for those who are running a healing tree build, this is something that you really want to put on if you are going to use the fire staff. This quick incinerate actually pushes enemies back. So after you cast a massive heal like the Sacred Ground and Splash or any two aggro drawing abilities, all you've got to do is hit the incinerate as everything hits into you. This will push them back. It grants you a few seconds reprieve in that point of time, which can allow somebody else to then steal the aggro from you. Having a person with a secondary aggro ability or some other mage near you can push a second incinerate on you after you have cast your first one, and then you can both then the mage can run off you into the mid, and then from the mid into the tank, and that is a good way to pull the aggro around. Now, something that was pointed out to me on my mistake for aggro is long range foes don't change their aggro that quickly. They generally stick to the life staff user. Now, in combat, the life staff user still has long range capability for fire. If you're using the right side of the tree, you have 0 cost to your light and heavy attacks. If you keep applying those damages, you will kill long range enemies. Obviously, in expeditions or elite areas, that isn't the best of ideas. The mid range can assist the healer in that situation, but it is not up to the mage to actually help with that particular position. Their whole job is to actually pull all close range enemies out. If you have too many long range enemies, then the tank should run into the long range enemies and cause a massive aggro close to them to pull their range on him, and the mid range will still have to take out the ranged enemies. It always works that way. That is their function. Now, moving on, the next part is Scorched. Each hit of Incinerate causes an additional stack of burning. So by putting on more stacks of burning, you're actually improving the damage from burn. It went from 133 up to 139. I think it's up to 3 stacks. No, it doesn't say a limit, so you can keep going. Now, some enemies don't get pushed back, especially bosses, and applying a massive burn on them for 6 seconds, if it's 10 stack because they stayed in for too long in your Incinerate, you now have a 10 stack of burn on them that is really going to push heavy on them at 30% of your weapon damage per second. If you manage to do it, obviously I don't think it's possible to pull such a big stack, but it is a possibility for you to increase it. Now let's move on to the next one. Cauterize Wounds, restore 20% of Incinerate damage dealt as health. Now, if you are a mage, taking damage is something you are going to be really worried about. By casting this ability, you pull off the requirement of the healer to heal you. Restores 20% of Incinerate damage dealt as health. So as soon as a massive number jump onto a target, if you use Incinerate to pull back health for yourself, you're making a big bonus for the healer. The healer doesn't have to worry about you as a mage. It is a good play for you as a mage, but it might not be the best when we go through the second tree. I'll get into that as we get there. Last but not least, we have Flame Out. Incinerate hits twice. So because you now have 2 burns and some enemies can stay in that circle, let's say that it stacks twice and it's now going to happen 2 times, that means you can actually have a 4 stack. It is a possibility that it's a 3 stack at the maximum, so this means that you can now have up to 6. Obviously it isn't that 30% that I was talking about, but it still is a big difference. At 6 you have 18% excess damage, which will last for 6 seconds. That works out to quite a bit of damage overall. Your initial damage is 130, and if you double that, that's 260. 260 plus 260 plus 90, 98, 99% weapon damage. It's a massive amount for you to have altogether. Wait, no, I'm wrong. It is over 100% excess, so it's over 300% damage dealt with this. It's on 11 seconds of cooldown and it costs 22 mana. Now overall, if you're mixing your abilities, as I said, a mana potion is going to help you big time as a mage. You want to deploy them even if you have regeneration abilities. Sorry about that. Let me get back into the game. Okay, so let's get back to the next ability, and that is the final one, Burnout. Dash forward up to 11 meters through targets, dealing 129% weapon damage on hit. Passing through a target will inflict burning, deals 10% weapon damage each second for 8 seconds, costs 30 mana. Now this is the move that you will use to help your tank, and you can also use this move once you have pulled aggro to get to the tank. All you've got to do is make sure that the enemies line up between you and the tank. You burn right through, you hit the boss, you hit whatever enemies are on the tank, and you form up behind the tank. When you get behind the tank should be able to pull aggro because everything will group in close to you, and if they can shield bash them or taunt them, everything comes to them. You then run around the enemies and back to the healer. It is a big run and a big burn, but it is the idea behind it. At 129% damage and the 10% burn that you are going to apply for 8 seconds, that's an 80% weapon damage. Now it does increase if I'm correct. Fire staff cooldowns are reduced by 5% for each foe hit by burnout. So by doing this here, you're now reducing your cooldowns. That means you can apply these more often. Obviously they're not the best attacks for you to keep relying on. As you can see, it has a 18.4 second cooldown. Heat it up, burnout goes 50% further. Now this is a very dangerous position. Remember, you can't be too far away from the tank when you burn through. If you do use this ability, make sure that you have it planned correctly so that you don't burn through the tank. Now last but not least is the special skill, Reheat. After 4 seconds without activating a fire staff ability, your mana regen is increased by 400%. Now 4 seconds without activating an ability is not very long. So every 4 seconds your mana regen goes through the roof. Obviously, if you are patient enough with this here, a 400% regen will mean in less than 10 seconds you have full health. That means every 15 seconds you have full mana. If you aren't going to use a potion, this is a good idea. As you can see, it does help big time because it means all these abilities are at your advantage every few seconds. Now obviously I have to get into where these play the best role. So Pyromania. While holding a fire staff and below 50% max health, deal 15% increased damage. Heat up. When you block a melee attack, restores 5% of your max mana. Kindle, burning lasts 20% longer. That is a very good one. 6 seconds, adding it 0.6 of a second. That means 1 extra burn from these. These get a big boost for their burn as well, and this one has the biggest boost bonus with that short instant. It's basically an extra second. It really does help big time. So let's look at the next one. Let it burn. Whenever burn deals damage, gain 10% fortify for 2 seconds. Fortify reduces incoming damage. This is a good one for getaways. As you can see, using this to get to the tank, it will give you a chance to get away from the enemies as well. Watch it burn. Critical hits with fire staff ability inflicts burning damage, 3% weapon damage each second for 6 seconds. This is a dangerous one because it will cause aggro to shift to you very quickly. Okay, combat speed. When you activate a fire staff ability, gain 10% haste for 5 seconds. Haste increases movement speed. Now as you can see, this was the Pyromania. Now Pyromania is good for sub builds. It's not going to be your perfect build for your primary fire staff user. As you could see, the abilities are very basics. It's a quick pushback. This is going to deal some damage. It's good to pull aggro. It's good to hold aggro for a few seconds. It's basically in the same class as taunt, but because of the damage output, they generally will give you a big boost. Flamethrower will attract a lot of enemy attention, and it will become a heavy burden on you after a few seconds of use. So let's get into the Fire Mage. Now Fire Mage is what you want for assault, and this is a very good one. Invoke a burst of flames at the target area that deals 170% weapon damage. Now 170% weapon damage on a single burst is a fantastic thing for you to have. Because it's a pillar of fire and it does this here, this is a good attack for you to use against bosses or to try and get rid of enemies. 170 means it's more than a single assault, and its mana cost is quite low at 15 mana. Let's see what the next skill does. First strike. Pillar of Fire deals 40% more damage to foes at full health. So if you do this here as your first strike, you can do 40% increased damage. That puts it up to 210% weapon damage. That is a massive increase. Let's go to the last one. Arson's Advantage. Gain 10% of your max mana per enemy hit by Pillar of Fire. So max mana generally is 100. If you have the right skills, it will be slightly larger. Now obviously I didn't count that in for the other side because those were off pearls basically that I was talking about, and you do have to break them up with other things that you are going to use. So if you count this one here with the max mana gain, if you pull off a Pillar of Fire in the middle of the field and you gaining 10%, if you have a tank who's in the middle of battle and you hit this on them and you basically run down your mana to almost nothing, this could be as good as a potion. Hitting 6 enemies instantly will give you 60%. That will give you, if you have 100, it will give you 60 mana. That means you can use this power 4 more times to gain back mana. A big deal, but obviously it's not the biggest. Okay, so Meteor Shower. Meteor Shower is another good ability. I've seen it used so many times to help the tank. It doesn't cause a lot of aggro from what I can tell, because every time that it's been used to help the tank to take down adds, it's never caused the enemies to actually disperse. So call down a rain of meteors for 6 seconds in the target area, dealing 34% weapon damage on initial impact and an additional 20% weapon damage per second while target remains in the area. Cost 5 mana per second, 30 mana at full cost. Okay, so it lasts for, as you can see, 6 seconds. So as a result of this, it costs a total of 30 mana. Now when you're calling down those meteors, each initial hit takes 34% hit and a 20% burn basically per second in there. So it's a 54% weapon damage per second. It's not as useful as other abilities, but it is very useful for taking out an area. As you can see, it keeps that massive damage in an area, so if a tank taunts and pulls a lot of enemies in, you can actually clear the room very easily with the skill. Remember, 54% damage doesn't seem like it's that much, but it does add on as you go down. Immolation. The initial hit of Meteor gives you 1% of your max mana for each target hit. So if you have a tank who's just pulled everything on him, that's a nice room with 6 targets, you gain 6% mana. 6% mana may not seem like it's a lot, but it's 1 extra second of mana regen basically given to you. The next one is Fury Determination. Adds grit while casting Meteor Shower. Grit prevents you from being staggered by incoming attacks. Now that is a good thing because it stops you from being knocked down and breaking your ability. However, this is a very dangerous one to use because holding grit for too long means you can take a lot more weapon damage. Judgment of Helios. All hits after the impact deal 25% weapon damage. Right, so it's now going to make sure that the weapon damage stacks on top of this here. 25% for all those hits in those few seconds that it's hitting. It makes a big difference to you. An additional 25% pulls up that 50% to 75, 79% basically, and 80% assault. Makes a big difference for that initial attack. It does mean that you're upwards of 480% weapon damage. That's about 5 times your weapon damage. It is good, but it isn't the best. It is good for taking down adds in a small area, and it is a very good assistant mage ability. So let's go on with Fireball. Shoot a heavy fireball that deals 140% weapon damage on impact and leaves behind a 3-meter burning field that lasts 6 seconds. The burning field deals 10% weapon damage each second. The ability cannot crit. So since it cannot crit, you can't get massive weapon damage from it, but it does 140% weapon damage, and it does 10% burn. Scorched Earth, Fireball, Burning Field lasts for 9 seconds. Now this is more like what you want. 90% burn makes a big difference. Last but not least, catch. Direct hits with Fireball give you 10% of your max mana and reduces your Fire Staff ability cools down by 7%. Now as you can see, this tree is a little bit more costly in terms of your actual mana cost, but it is very good for your general usage as a mage. It isn't putting you in the front line of combat, it's keeping you to the back where you need to be. You're capable of running around slowly. You have attacks which don't cause too much of aggro. You have 2 attacks which are going to cause a ton of aggro, and you have massive assistance. Okay, let's go. Spell Focus. Heavy attacks restore 5% of your max mana on hit. Fury Restoration. Heavy attacks reduce Fire Staff cooldowns by 10% on hit. Alright, Clear Mind. While holding a Fire Staff and above 50% mana, gain 5% empowered. Okay, so that's increasing your damage. Singe. Light attacks inflict burning on foes, deals 3% weapon damage each second for 6 seconds. Clear Casting. If you haven't taken damage in the last 3 seconds, deal 5% more damage. Spellslinger. Your Fire Staff abilities gain an extra 10% chance to critical strike. Flare. Heavy attacks no longer consume mana. And Prophet of Fire God. While holding a Fire Staff, your critical strike damage is increased by 15%. Okay, this is something that I forgot to go. Ruin of Helios. Using a Fire Staff ability places a 2-meter ruin on the ground that increases your damage by 25% while standing in the ruin. The ruin lasts for 7 seconds. Cools down is every 30 seconds. Now, if you use this in the right position, that is, for example, if you cast the Pillar of Flame on your tank with a boss around, with airs all around you, your entire team gains a boost in damage by 25%. Now, it may not seem like a lot to you, but think about if you had a Great Axe user. Remember, they can do 22 times the damage. If you using your ability like this and you cast it, obviously if you can mix your 2 trees together, this would be a good ultimate skill for you to hold. By using it, you actually improve everybody else on your team. As you can see, the Fire Mage is meant for team play. The Pyromancer is meant more or less for an individual's play. It's meant to pull aggro off you. It's meant to deal a great deal of damage in a straight line. Not really meant for too much of a heavy build. And last but not least, you have that Burnout, a quick burning dash to get away from enemies, or to inflict massive damage while kiting enemies around. And as you can see, this is all for the individual, this is all for the team. Now, the 2 sides have their advantages. I'm not going to deny it. The side with the greater damage is definitely going to be the Pyromania. The damage is really massive if you count it over an accumulation of time. This side does have a lot of damage. It doesn't equivalent to the Flamethrower. As I said, dealing 1% weapon damage a second, you can do 60 times. That's 6,000 weapon damage, and that's just off the Flamethrower. If you add the other abilities in, it doesn't work out as high. That ability, the ability is actually what causes the most amount of damage. These small things do a small amount of damage. You can use them for just adding that slight little boost, but you have to get back to the Flamethrower as fast as possible. You will have to consume a potion. You're going to have to do those things to actually keep them effective, and you're not going to get an advantage of using reheat. If you are using reheat, it will be between 2 areas, and that is basically how it goes. As you can see, I have the Void Gauntlet in my hand, and for now I'm actually using it to test it out for the video that's coming on it. So hope you all do enjoy, and I will catch you all in the next one.